I like to present, for this poster presentation, I'd like to present findings from my study that examine how managing stress interdependently will affect first generation and racial ethnic minority students. So college life can be stressful. There are a lot to juggle for these young adults, and it can be stressful particularly for first generation students who are coming from racial ethnic minority groups. And importantly, this greater stress not only threatens their emotional well-being, but it can predict a lower sense of belonging in college. And the sense of belonging is a key predictor of academic commitment and achievement. So, for example, a study found that racial minority students, on the day when they experience greater stress, they also tend to report lower sense of belonging. So they are more likely to report that I don't belong here, I don't fit in the school. And that predicts the greater achievement gap between racial minority group students and white students. And one critical context that can work disadvantageously to first-generation minority students is the cultural mismatch between their home culture and university culture. So first-generation minority students tend to share interdependent cultural values. So why? So first, working class people, the background of most first generation students are exposed to more unpredictable, riskier, and precarious life circumstances that can foster relying on one another for support and self-protection and care. So these are really socialized interdependent norms and values. And among racial ethnic minorities groups, although they are absolutely heterogeneous culture groups, but compared, but compared to non-Hispanic white, they share the cultural similarity of seeing themselves inseparable from their close social ties. So first generation minority students' interdependent cultural values are however, relatively underappreciated in American university settings that emphasize independence. So once you enter the university, abundant freedom to be on your own is given to students. And they are constantly encouraged to think differently from others and to be able to march on your drum beats. So it may be particularly effective for these first generation minority students to regulate emotional distress via social relationship that can affirm their interdependence, which is often underappreciated in their universities. And studies have shown that emotion regulation can be more adaptive when it matches the cultural norms and values that individuals endorse. So here, I'll use the term interpersonal emotion regulation to refer to regulate emotional distress via social relationships. So this research aimed to examine whether interpersonal emotion regulation predicts belonging among first-gen minority students using a daily diary method. And there were three key hypotheses. First, daily interpersonal emotion regulation will predict daily belonging positively among first-gen minority students. And second, the daily interpersonal emotion will predict higher daily belonging more strongly among first-gen minority students than non-first-gen minority students. In other words, continuing generation non-Hispanic white students. So here I predicted essentially the interaction between this first-gen minority status and daily interpersonal emotion regulation to predict daily belonging. And lastly, I hypothesized that interpersonal emotion regulation will predict a decrease in achievement gap between first-gen minority versus non-first-gen minority students, and that will be mediated by the increase in belonging among first-gen minority students. So the study recruited students from interpsych subject pool, and they are asked to complete a baseline survey and following daily surveys for 14 days. And when I submitted the abstract, the targeted sample size was 400, 200 FGM students, but 323 participants have completed the study before the conference. So I have to present findings from conducting preliminary data analysis on the smaller sample size, but the full analysis will be conducted after I stop the data collection in the semester when I reach the targeted sample size. So given the limited space of this poster, I would click here to see, to present details of the measures. So first, the key predictor for Asian minority status was determined by parental education level and self-reported race and ethnicity. So in this sample, the racial ethnic minorities included Hispanic, African American, Asians, and Native Americans. And daily interpersonal emotion regulation was measured by Emotion Regulation Repertoire of Social Support Scale developed by Stelzer. So Stelzer et al. So this emotion regulation measure captures not only the quantity of interpersonal emotion regulation, but also a range of repertoire, range of different diversified strategies provided from the social relationships. So in baseline, participants listed their network members, refers to people who they interact with regularly. And we provided different categories of social network to help them recall easily. So those categories included family members, relationship partner, friends that they knew before college, friends that they met at the college, and any other individuals. So it can go up to 26 people. And then in daily survey, participants were presented with the list that they provided in the baseline. And when after seeing this list of names, they indicated whether they interacted with each member on a given day, and then selected all emotion regulation strategies provided from these people. So here, this is an example. So this participant see a list of names that she or he provided. And additionally, we allowed them to write the names of people that they did not list in the baseline, but they interacted on a given day. And let's say this person checked this Carlos R. And the next question is asking, did the person do anything to help you regulate your feelings? And you can see a variety of possible emotion regulation strategies that can be provided from other people. It can go up to 17 strategy. And participants checked out all strategies provided by this person. So the score of daily interpersonal emotion regulation is the total number of emotion regulation strategies provided by all social interactions. So for example, let's if you look at this figure, this represents that this person listed or checked 6 people as people that that they had a social interaction with. And then these are the list of possible emotion regulation strategy from each person. So you can see that Carlos provided 5 strategy, whereas Evie did not do anything in terms of emotion regulation of this person. So the total number or the score of the interpersonal emotion regulation is essentially the total number of the black cells here. Okay. So the outcome variable daily belonging, we use the 6-item scale adapted from Walton and Cohen. So example item would be, right now, I feel like I fit in well at the University of Arizona. And we also measure daily stressor as a control variable. So it was the number of stressful events using daily inventory of stressful events. And this was necessary because by nature, when participants experience more stressor, they are more likely to employ emotion regulation strategies. So without controlling for the number of stressful events, so daily emotion regulation will always predict more negative outcome because it's when they experience more stressors. So we like to know the potential effect of the, interpersonal emotion regulation when the level of stressors are held constant. And lastly, another outcome variable, academic achievement, was measured by official term GPA obtained from the university. And we had these other covariates for the analysis. So coming back to this rather busy slide, I used the multimodal analysis for this hypothesis testing, and you can click this hyperlink for model specifications and detailed results, but I will present the results pertain to the hypothesis. So first, among first-generation minority, on the days when they employed more interpersonal emotion regulation, they reported higher belonging in school. So the hypothesis was supported. And I have to note that the effect size was pretty small, and which is typical for study examine the daily fluctuation. It's unlikely that students' belonging will go from 1 to 7 from one day to the next day. So here the y-axis doesn't go all the way from 1 to 7. But nonetheless, that small fluctuation was predicted by the daily interpersonal emotion regulation across days. And the second hypothesis was that the daily association between interpersonal emotion regulation belonging will be different between first-gen minority and non-first-gen minority students. That was not supported. In fact, this positive daily association between interpersonal emotion regulation and belonging was also present among non-first generation minority students as well. And I'll come back to this with some speculations for reason why later in the discussion. And lastly, belonging did not moderate the GPA difference between FGM and non-FGM groups. And because there was no association between mediator belonging and outcome variable GPA, it did not pursue further mediation analysis. So the big takeaway of this study is that regulating emotion, the daily interpersonal regulating emotion via social relationships, aka daily interpersonal emotion regulation, may increase sense of belonging among first-gen minority students. And but inconsistent with prior literature, belonging did not predict GPA either among first-gen minority or non-first-gen minority students. And these results are from partially collected data, so should be taken with caution. But some null findings could be partly due to the circumstances that are relevant to, that are related to the pandemic. So for example, the GPA tend to be pretty high. The mean GPA was over close to 3.5, and that could be partly because university advised the instructor to be lenient on their grading, given this circumstances that the students had to deal with. And also, I like to delve into a little more of the null findings of this hypothesis too. So the lack of interaction. So the hypothesis too was that the relationship between, the association between emotion regulation and daily belonging will be stronger among first-gen minority students. That wasn't the case. And one reason could be that even non-first generation minority students reported relatively lower belonging in 2020 fall semester. So in 2020 fall, when I collected this data, many freshmen in our sample attended school remotely for their first semester in college. It's hard to comprehend what that experience will be like. But compared to, in terms of, with regard to the social belonging, compared to the previous spring semester, non-first gen minority students, so continuing generation, non-Hispanic white students, their belonging decreased to the level of first gen minority students in the earlier semester. So you can see that this is the first gen minority students belonging level in earlier semester. And this is the non-first gen minority students belonging in the 2020 fall. So you can see there was no significant difference between these two groups, whereas this non-first generation minority students belonging significantly dropped from the earlier spring in the fall semester. So although it's speculative, it's possible that interpersonal emotion regulation predicted higher belonging for both first-gen minority and non-first-gen minority when non-first-gen minority students' belonging is as low as first-gen minority students. Oops. And to the final note, because the results are quite mixed in terms of whether this interpersonal emotion regulation is particularly effective among students from interdependent cultural background. Future research should identify specific cultural values or beliefs that affect both the use and effectiveness of interpersonal emotion regulation among first-gen minority students. Thank you.